Hey, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording may be shared by us with registered participants, and may be used by the Israel Magen Fund of Canada on our website and the social media. I'd also like to thank Andre Havro. He's our Director of Marketing and Operations for the hard work in promoting and putting this webinar together. For those of you whom I haven't met, my name is Shiri Lidei. I'm the Executive Director of the Israel Magen Fund of Canada. We are a registered Canadian charity that supports critical needs in Israel through three areas of impact: medical equipment, emergency response and search and rescue, and mental health and resilience. Over the past few years, we've had the privilege of helping hospitals purchase life-saving equipment, supporting first responders, and partnering with extraordinary organizations that care for people during their most difficult moments. But one thing has become increasingly clear to us: healing is not physical. Since October 7th, we've all seen heartbreaking images and heard devastating stories. Yet, behind every headline, there are people carrying invisible wounds. A child who no longer feels safe and cannot fall asleep at night, parents trying to stay together for their family while continue to go on reserves or try to still make a living, a first responder who cannot forget what they witnessed, or someone sitting alone late at night with their thoughts and anxiety, simply needing another human being to listen. Those invisible wounds matter, and they don't disappear when the headlines move on. That is why mental health and resilience have become such an important part of our work at the Israel Magen Fund of Canada, and why we felt it was so important to host today's conversation. Today's webinar is about trauma, but it is also about hope. It is about understanding how people and communities cope, and whether growth and resilience are possible even after unimaginable experiences. I don't think there could be a more timely or important conversation than this. Before we begin our discussion, please feel free to share your thoughts, questions in the chat, and we will leave time for questions, Q&A part at the end. So, to our first speaker, to help us explore these questions, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Amit Rotem. Dr. Rotem is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Toronto, Associate Chief of Child, Youth, and Family Services at CAMH, and an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. And he's also a good friend of mine. Originally trained in Israel, he completed his medical studies and psychiatric residency at Ben-Gurion University in Be'er Sheva in the Negev, before continuing his training in Canada. His work focuses on child and adolescent mental health, addiction, and recovery. Dr. Rotem, thank you very much for being with us today. And
thank you so much, Shiri. I hope you can all hear me well. Thank you for your kind introduction. And perhaps I will start by sharing my presentation. If you give me just a second. Okay. Okay. And I'll move it to, okay. I hope that everyone can see the presentation and hear me. So Fantastic. So again, I'm Dr. Amit Rotem. I'm joining you from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH, in which have been working for at least almost 15 years now, working with kids and youth who've been struggling with with addictions and mental health disorders and concurrent substance use. And trauma and PTSD have been very common, unfortunately, also with this population. And when Shiri asked me to cover the understanding of post-traumatic growth in youth, one of the things I approached one of my clients that they are now 20-year-old, and I asked them, we have been working, for almost 5 years together, diagnosed with PTSD, unfortunately struggled with multiple traumatic events, including loss of parents, sexual abuse, and more recently, losing friend for overdose. I asked them, what's post-traumatic growth for you after 5 years working in and knowing better for, the area? So they looked at me and then said, there's no post-traumatic growth. The trauma is ongoing, but you learn that the future is there for you. You're keeping working and seeking for new opportunities. You understand that your new family, including your friends, really like you and actually wants to be near you. Then you stop worrying, you have your safe environment, and eventually you considering stop self-harming, which made me a lot of think about what can be a growth into the trauma. And I hope that I'll be able to convince you a bit about this whole new notion called post-traumatic growth. So what is the PTG, or post-traumatic growth? So post-traumatic growth refers to the positive changes individuals can experience as a result of adversity. So in 2023, later on 2024, Tedeschi and Calhoun coined the PTG that emphasizes that while trauma can lead to suffering, it can also result in significant personal development. So as you see here, it is not the absence of suffering, but the ability to find meaning within it and after the struggle. PTG is about learning to find meaning, as I said, and acknowledge that growth often comes from challenging experiences. So in order to understand the growth in youth, just a few words about what's going on with trauma in youth. So youth today face various traumatic experiences, from emotional and physical abuse to natural disaster and loss in this hectic pace of our world. These experiences can profoundly impact their development and worldview. As it says there, trauma disrupts the child's worldview and sense of safety. The safety that I'm talking about, secure attachment that hopefully built in a very, very essential days of life. And other common adversity, including bullying and chronic illnesses, can also impact this sense of safety. So it's crucial to recognize the prevalence of trauma among children and adolescents to understand the context in which PTG occurs. So I could bring lots of examples, but I just decided to, before we talk about growth, just to give you some idea how common trauma really is. So many children and teens, somewhere between 14 and 43%, will go through at least one traumatic event. Yet only a minority go to develop PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Roughly 3 to 15% of girls and 1 to 6% of boys. The national numbers are sobering, and this is from the statistics comes from US Department of Veteran Affairs National Center for PTSD, that's capturing annually what's going on also with kids. And I have to say that also doing good job also capturing many numbers of our area also in Canada, and sometimes also across Europe, because they do their own appreciation for their own for the US. So as I said, it's pretty sobering. So Child Protective Services filed about 3 million reports a year involving 5.5 million children with abuse confirmed in around 30% of cases. And when we look at those confirmed cases involved neglect dominance at 65%, followed by physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. So I'm not sharing this to alarm, but to underscore the scale of the need and to remind us that to many young people who do experience this trauma, post-traumatic growth is a real and hopeful possibility. PTG, or post-traumatic growth, identify within its model 5 key domains where growth can manifest after trauma. These include appreciation of life or a deeper sense of gratitude, enhanced relationship, increased empathy and closer bonds, new possibilities or discovering new paths or interest, personal strength. For example, if I survive that, I can survive anything, and spiritual changes, shifts of value, shifts of future orientation sometimes. Each domain represents a different way that individual can experience positive changes, illustrated the multifaceted nature of growth. It doesn't have to say that whoever wants to see growth will need to go all of the domains. And sometimes we see that youth will go through one domain, then shift to other domains, and there's lots of dynamics around the growth. But these are the 5 main domains that were identified or outlined in this model. And what about some neurobiology? And I'm on a very tip of the iceberg on what's going on in the brain. It seems that our nervous system is very responsive, negatively to trauma, positively to change and growth. So we know that trauma can heighten threat detection in the amygdala, which is, as you see here, an inner structure in the brain, and to stress response symptoms. What's happened during trauma or a chronic repetitive trauma, but not only, that's the areas in the front brain, what we call the front cortex or the prefrontal cortex, that should tell us what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, should help us store really needs memory or tell us what's real or unreal. They get very distorted or distracted because of trauma, because of burst of dopamine that later on stop actually responding to it during PTSD. So they're getting blunted here. However, the amygdala and other area called hippocampus is becoming much more activated and actually storing more unwanted memories that becoming more activated and concerning. So sometimes clients still have memories and they cannot even identify if it's real or unreal. And in PTSD, we know that flashbacks or recurrent traumatic events, or often called as re-traumatization, is very frequent symptoms, but also hypervigilance, because these traumatic events keeps on alarming the flight of fight response, adrenaline, serotonin, later on dopamine in the more chronic states keep on coming in. So when we start working with growth or post-traumatic growth, we see that there's a stronger top-down regulation from prefrontal cortex. So we start to see some signs of reactivation of the prefrontal cortex that can affect the amygdala to reduce some of the signals, and the neuroplasticity, which is basically the brain remarkable ability to change, to recognize, and readapt physical structures, can happen with traumatic, with the post-traumatic growth. Interestingly, one hormone is more of the scope in post-traumatic growth is the oxytocin. Yes, the same oxytocin that induce contraction in labor, and the one that's really, really important for love and care. We also see that during socialization and that people with trauma start to look not only the inner circle, but look for others. There's more production of oxytocin that really reduces the adrenergic response and induce neuroplasticity and a calming effect in the brain. So all of this to say that might be some neurobiology effect also for post-traumatic growth that happens. So, and what's the role of resilience? I think also Shiri mentioned it a few times. So we know that the resilience plays a vital role in the process of PTG. It involves the ability to adapt, and bounce back from adversity. While post-traumatic growth is the outcome of this resilience, it's important to understand that not everyone who experiences trauma will grow. Factors like personality traits and coping strategies significantly influence this process. And you can see that optimism, emotional regulation, access to resources, all are factors that can strengthen resilience. So what about the safety net, and how important is the social support in traumatic growth? So we know that social support is essential in fostering PTG. When youth have trusting relationship with adults and peers, they are better equipped to navigate their trauma. This support can come in various forms, such as emotional validation, encouragement, and practical help. Building a strong support network is crucial for prompting resilience and growth. This is start building a safety nest with small circle of support that may expand. Observe small group event, care, even caring for a pet, later on care for others. These are small advices or recommendations that we often give to clients that, you know, well, they have been told or then recommended many, many times by friends. Why won't you come with us to, now, you know, now it's summer, come to camp, come to parties, let's do some fun. And then they come and tell me, listen, I just leave me alone, just be myself. So I tell them, listen, just go there, don't do anything, just attend, just observe, start making any communication. These very, very small steps to be in a social environment may foster later growth. And yes, there might be, as I said, some neurobiology also evidences for these improvements and changes. What's, again, the benefits of this growth in youth? So we are talking about psychological benefits, so increased resilience, a strong capacity to face future challenges, improving coping skills like healthier strategies to manage stress, enhance relationships, so deeper empathy and more meaningful bonds, for example. And then there's the longer term effect. So a lasting positive impact on mental health and overall well-being, as true for many other mental health component or disorder, have already been reported when clients who've been struggling engage in growth and positive changes. And as an example, just as a case study for another turning points from a loss of for leadership. So just to take a moment to look at the real life examples that I also wanted to bring to you of post-traumatic growth in action, sharing a story about young person who faced significant loss, talking about lost her parents to a car accident when she was 17-year-old, then turned to heavy substance use, but turned later that pain into purpose by starting a support group for peers. young adults who were recovered addicts who suffer losses. And this group still happening here in Toronto bi-weekly at this point for transitional age youth. So this is an example of how this transformation illustrates how adversity can lead to unexpected leadership and empathy, showcasing the potential for growth even in the darkest times. How can we encourage post-traumatic growth? So through counseling and therapy, so we can suggest professional guidance in process of to process trauma, peer support groups with shared experience and sense of belonging, family involvement when appropriate, a stable caring foundation at home. These are all can foster safety environment where people who suffer trauma can start looking in sharing and feel that they are well cared and feel safe. And there's also, I thought to mention the role of educators. School can foster an everyday environment that supports growth, safe classrooms, trusted teachers, space to be heard. These are all identified and environments that can really foster post-traumatic growth. Few more words, and I also look well acknowledging my time. Just a few challenges and misconceptions. So there might be myths also about growth. So I think it's important also to say that as we discuss PTG, it's essential to address that one myth is that everything happened for a reason, which can dismiss the genuine suffering individual experiences. Another is that PTG is quick and easy process, which is far from the truth. It often takes time to support. Finally, it is crucial to recognize that post-traumatic growth and PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder can coexist. It's not a linear process. They often also come together. It's possible to experience both struggle and growth simultaneously, and vice versa, and go back and forth in between. So to conclude, in conclusion, I would say that post-traumatic growth is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Understanding PTG can help us support youth as they navigate their trauma and ultimately emerge stronger. I encourage everyone to reflect on how we can foster environments that promote healing and growth. And I would, if we have time later on, I would be more than happy to open the floor to questions and discussion about this important topic. Here are some references, and thank you very much for listening.
Amit, thank you very much. Toda raba. It's interesting. Amit spoke about the importance of social support and having a safety net, and now we see that it's also scientifically proven. And he mentioned educators, family support groups. These are all areas that we in the Israel Magen Fund of Canada support. Amazing organizations in Israel that do really important work in all these fields. So thanks, Amit, again. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Amir Blumenfeld and our partner organization, SAHAR. SAHAR is an organization in Israel providing 24/7 free anonymous online emotional support to individuals experiencing distress, loneliness, trauma, and suicidal thoughts. In the aftermath of October 7th and throughout the ongoing war, SAHAR has become an even more critical lifeline for countless Israelis seeking support, often in the middle of the night when loneliness and fear are at their greatest and sleep feels impossible. In those moments, a simple human connection, a person who listens without judgment, can make all the difference. And that is precisely what SAHAR provides. Dr. Blumenfeld is a pediatric surgeon, former lieutenant colonel, and chief of the trauma and Combat Medicine branch of the Israel Defense Forces Medical Corps, and a senior healthcare executive with more than 30 years of experience in trauma, medicine, and healthcare innovation. For the past 5 years, he has served as chairman of SAHAR's board of directors. Since October 7th, he has also played an important role volunteering with the Hostages and Missing Families Forum and helping advocate for the release of the hostages that are now released. There are very few people who have witnessed the impact of trauma from so many different perspectives. As a physician, military leader, mental health advocate, and someone deeply involved in helping Israeli society navigate this difficult period. Dr. Blumenfeld will share his unique insights into the profound psychological impact of war, PTSD, and the collective trauma currently shaping Israeli society, while highlighting the indispensable role of SAHAR in healing and supporting a nation in crisis. Dr. Blumenfeld, Amir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this conference, Shiri. And now, after Amit spoke about PTG, and everyone knows everything about PTG, we can carry on and keep on going. And just like you said, my name is Amir Blumenfeld, and I'm a pediatric surgeon by training, a former lieutenant colonel and chief of the trauma and combat medicine at the IDF. And for the 5 past years, I have been the chair of SAHAR, and the leading Israeli organization for mental health assistance. But today I want to speak to you not only from my professional experience, I want to speak to you from something more personal. After the October 7, I volunteered with the medical team of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, evaluating the physical and psychological consequences of captivity and working to communicate those consequences to anyone willing to listen. I also co-founded BOO, Come Together, a civic initiative dedicated to advocating the release of all hostages, mainly by educating public decision makers about what prolonged captivity does to human body and to the human mind. This picture down the slide is very significant for me because this is the last broadcast I took part in, and it says to those who do not understand Hebrew or cannot read Hebrew, it says the last 20 living hostages have been released. And this is something that no one can really imagine. Well, on October 7th, Israel lost more than lives. It lost the most fundamental assumption that allows human beings to function, the assumption and belief that tomorrow will probably resemble yesterday. For most people, this assumption operates silently in the background. We leave home believing that we will return. We send our kids to school assuming that they will come back in the afternoon. We make plans for next week, next month, next year, because our brains are wired to expect continuity. Trauma changes that. Trauma teaches the brain that the unimaginable can happen. And once the unimaginable has happened, the brain has no longer dismissed it as impossible. When people talk about or think about October 7, they usually think about those who were directly affected, the survivors of the massacre, the hostages and their families, the bereaved, the wounded, the soldiers. And indeed, these are the people carrying the heaviest burden. But what we are witnessing in Israel today affects the entire society. Since October 7, Israelis have been living inside a reality that does not end. The massacre, the war in Gaza, the hostages, repeated rounds of reserve duties, missile attacks, 2 Iranian conflicts, terror attacks in our cities, political fracture, a persistent feeling that the crisis is not over. And even in the quieter moments, the nervous system does not fully stand down. The siren stops, but the vigilance does not. To understand how trauma like this spreads through entire society, we need a framework. Professor Meirav Roth, a good friend of mine from the University of Haifa, offers one through what she calls the 4 circles. The first circle consists of those directly affected, the murdered, the kidnapped, the physically wounded. The second circle includes their immediate families and dear ones, and the third circle includes extended family and friends. But then there is a 4th circle. It is the rest of us. Those who were not murdered, not kidnapped, not physically injured, yet our lives have nevertheless been profoundly affected. The parents who spent months explaining sirens to their 4-year-olds, the spouse waiting for loved ones completing their third, fourth, or fifth round of reserve duty, the business owners whose livelihood vanishes overnight, the citizens who wake up every morning to another headline about war, loss, and violence. This is the fourth circle, and in many ways it includes all of the Israeli society. They suffer, or we suffer, in silence because we feel that we have no right to complain. We feel that we are privileged, and so we hold it all in, while the tank of our emotional energy quietly drains away. I want to be precise about something. I'm not claiming that all Israelis have PTSD. PTSD is a specific clinical diagnosis, and most Israelis do not meet its full criteria. However, many experience trauma symptoms. What does this look like in everyday life? Trauma symptoms generally fall into 4 patterns. First one is intrusion, images, memories, and thoughts that return uninvited. Many Israelis can still recall exactly where they were on the morning of October 7th. Many still find themselves unexpectedly pulled back to those moments without warning. The second is avoidance. People stop watching the news, avoid certain conversations, stay away from places that carry emotional burdens. The third is hypervigilance, and this is exactly just like Amit said. The nervous system becomes stuck in a flight or fight mode. Difficulty in sleeping, a loud noise, the sound of a passing motorcycle, an unexpected knock, and an immediate shot of adrenaline induce. Constantly calculating what the nearest shelter is. The fourth is emotional exhaustion, a diminished sense of safety, loss of trust, growing pessimism, and a feeling that the person who existed before October 7 is somehow not fully present anymore. Professor Danny Braun, founder of the Israeli Center of the Treatment of Psychotrauma, has described what happens when an entire community exists under prolonged existential threat. The boundary between the safe backyard and the front line dissolve. The trauma becomes the environment itself. But society traumatized without every individual having PTSD. What we are witnessing is what research call collective trauma, a disruption of an entire community's basic sense of safety, predictability, and trust. Nevertheless, PTSD is here, and the numbers make this concrete. Research by Dr. Yossi Levi-Bez, a good friend of us, of the University of Haifa, who has been tracking the national cohort of Israelis since the and before the attack, found that PTSD symptoms in the general population jumped from 16% 1 month before October 7 to nearly 30% 1 month later. 2 years and 3 months later, the numbers has declined, but remained at almost 20%. As Levi-Bez notes, the figure is dramatically higher than the global lifetime prevalence of PTSD symptoms, which the WHO, the World Health Organization, estimates to be less than 4%. Israeli Ministry of Health reports that clinical insomnia, problems in sleeping, has risen from 5% of the population before October 7 to 28% today. 1 in 4 Israelis currently using alcohol, cannabis, or prescription sedatives at levels of increased risk. Domestic violence reports rose 65% in the first 6 months of the war. New diagnoses of eating disorders among teenagers rose by 23%. These are not statistics about soldiers. These are statistics about civilians, about the first circle, about all of us. A recent investigative report from broader numbers to this picture. The number of Israelis recognized by the National Insurance Institute, that's the Israeli Social Security Agency, as having psychological disabilities from war-related causes is rising from 6,400 before the war to over 69,000 today, a 10-fold increase in under 3 years. There are two specific kinds of trauma worth naming because they affect the fourth circle deeply. The first one is what we call secondary trauma, the impact of repeated exposure to other people's suffering. October 7 may have been the first attack in history experienced almost entirely through smartphones. Victims live streamed their final moments. Families watched events unfold in real time. Graphic images spread across the world within minutes. Since then, millions of Israelis have consumed an unrelenting stream of traumatic content, videos, photographs, names, faces, funerals, day after day. Second one worth mentioning is moral injury. This one is harder to talk about, but I think it is very important to name it honestly, especially in a room of people who really care about Israel. Moral injury occurs when we witness or participate in events that violate our deepest values, our beliefs about what is right, about how human beings should be treated. In Israel today, this takes many forms. It is the soldier who returns from Gaza carrying images he cannot describe or show with his families. It is the citizen who supports the necessity of the war and simultaneously cannot stop thinking about the children on the other side. It is the feeling of being trapped between the imperative to defend your country and the anguish of knowing what war causes suffering to the innocents. There are no clear or clean answers here, but the weight of those questions is real, and research by Professor Yuval Neriah of Columbia University has documented how moral injury can be more lasting than the fear itself. This trauma does not stop at Israeli borders. For generations, Israel has served as the anchor of Jewish identity around the world, the living proof that after everything the Jewish people had endured, there was a place of strength, serenity, and safety. When that anchor was shaken on October 7, the shockwaves crossed the oceans. For many Jews in Canada, the United States, and Europe, something fundamental shifted. Millions watched the events in real time. Many have families and friends in Israel. Many experienced fear, grief, anger, and helplessness in ways they had never expected to feel. And then came something else, a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism. We see it globally, but you feel it acutely in your own communities, on university campuses, in organized boycotts, and in boarding sovereign sites of security guards posted outside Jewish day schools and synagogues in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. For many, October 7 was followed by a second quieter trauma, the realization that the sense of belonging they had taken for granted was more fragile than they had believed. Research confirms what many feel intuitively. Shared national identity intensifies the psychological impact of collective threat. Jewish communities abroad did not simply observe the October 7 from distance. Many experienced it as happening to them too. The trauma of the Israeli society and the trauma of global Jewry have become deeply intertwined. We are grieving together and we are feeling threatened together. Yet, something remarkable happened alongside the trauma. And this started before any official system had mobilized. Israeli citizens were already acting. Hundreds of thousands and sometimes even more volunteers signed up within days. Private citizens drove to the south to evacuate strangers. Restaurants fed soldiers for free. Hotels opened the doors to evacuees without being asked to. Tech entrepreneurs converted their companies overnight to produce supplies to the military needs, and parents in Tel Aviv collected toys and books for children who had arrived from the south with nothing. None of this was organized by any ministry. It was not the product of any government program. It was spontaneous, decentralized, extraordinary expression of a society that refuses to collapse. And I think this tells us something important. The resilience of Israeli society does not live in its institutions. It lives in its people. When official systems have been slow or divided or absent, Israeli citizens have filled up the gap. Again and again, that impulse to turn towards each other rather than away is not a small thing. It is a very foundation of recovery. And there was something else, something that became one of the most out-sustained civic mobilization in Israel history. Every Saturday night, tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv, Hostel Square, and across the country, week after week, month after month, demanding that their government bring the hostages back home. Families of the kidnapped stood before crowds and cameras, refusing to be forgotten. Ordinary citizens organized vigils, distributed yellow ribbons, hung photographs on city walls. They did not wait to be told to care. They decided collectively and without instruction that our brothers and sisters held on the ground without light, without medical care, without food, would not be abandoned. That the country would not move on. That the country would not move on. That the wound would remain visible until it was healed. And for us at SAHAR, before the war, we operated for 10 hours a day. On the morning of October 7, our lines were opened at 9:30 a.m. and have never closed since. Since then, we have watched this national story take shape, not through headlines, but through the conversations themselves. Every spike in violence, every escalation, every difficult anniversary, we see it first in real time, in the volume and the tone of the people who reach out to us. The data I shared with you earlier, the rising numbers, the climbing percentages, we don't just read about that. We live it every single day in the conversation our volunteers have at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., in the quiet hours when someone finally decides they cannot carry it alone anymore and decides to address us. The story does not end with trauma, and it does not end with resilience either. What I want to describe now is something more, the possibility of growth after trauma, and Amit spoke a lot about it. And I just mentioned few things which apply to us here in Israel. Psychologists Richard Teheshi and Lawrence Kahuni introduced the concept of post-traumatic growth, but they were very careful about the wording. They did not suggest that trauma produces growth. They suggested that some people are able to create growth despite trauma. Growth is not the opposite of suffering. Growth can coexist with suffering. Someone may still experience nightmares while discovering a deeper appreciation of life. Someone may still grieve while becoming more compassionate towards others. Someone may continue carrying pain while finding new meanings. These are not contradictions. They are two parallel truths. I think that the Holocaust remains the darkest chapter in human history and in Jewish history above all. 6 million Jews murdered and countless others broken by grief, displacement, and loss. But what the generations that followed demonstrated is nothing short of extraordinary. And I would argue it is the most powerful example of collective post-traumatic growth in modern history. Within 3 years of the Holocaust ending, 3 years, a Jewish state was declared. Survivors and their children built not only families and communities, but universities, hospitals, democratic institutions, and one of the most innovative economies on earth. Israel today leads globally in medical research, water technology, cybersecurity, and agricultural science. Many of the psychological frameworks now used internationally to understand and treat trauma were developed here in Israel, and I try to quote only those by Israeli research who had no shortage of trauma, unfortunately, to study. This was not the erasure of grief. The grief remained, but alongside it, and in many ways because of it, the struggle with it, grew something that can only be called triumph of the human spirit. Growth did not replace grief. It grew alongside it. A landmark longitudinal study by Dr. Yossi Levi-Bez and Professor Neria tracked 560 Israelis across 6 measurement points, including 1 month before the attack and most recently in January 2026. As expected, PTSD, depression, anxiety spiked sharply after October 7 and then gradually declined. But post-traumatic growth moved in the opposite direction. It rose steadily across all 27 months of follow-up and was still climbing at the last measurement point, January 26. Trauma and growth are not opposites. They coexist, and over time, for many people, growth overtakes distress. Can an entire society undergo this process of growth? History, and specifically Jewish history, tells us it can. Yes, definitely. And we are already seeing the early signs of this process beginning again. The factors that research consistently identifies as enabling post-traumatic growth are social support, altruistic behavior, optimism, and sense of shared identity and purpose. These are precisely the conditions that Israeli civil society generated spontaneously after October 7, and they are the conditions that SAHAR works to sustain every day and every night. I want to tell you about a special girl. I call her girl, even though she's a lady, and she's a special person for me. She embodies the whole thing. Yuval Rafaeli is 26-year-old, beautiful girl. On the morning of October 7, 2023, she was at the Nova Music Festival when Hamas attacked. She survived by hiding in a bomb shelter near Kibbutz Be'eri, lying beneath the bodies of others for approximately 8 hours. She was wounded by shrapnel, and when it was over, she was one of the only survivors from her group. 1 year later, in 2024, she joined the national singing competition and won. She was selected to represent Israel at the Eurovision Song Contest in Basel, Switzerland. She performed a song called New Day Will Rise and finished second in the grand final.
And even if you say goodbye, you'll never go away. You are the rainbow in my sky, my colors in the gray. My only wish on the star, sunshine of the day. The only song that the piano ever plays. And even if you say goodbye, you'll always be around to lift me up and take me high. Keep my feet close to the ground. Are you proud tonight? Dreams are coming true. I choose the life to lose. If I lose you, you take rocks. Love will go on. Love you on the cross. Don't cry at all. Darkness won't fade. All the pain will go by. But we will stay. Even if you said goodbye. Si tu dis adieu, tu ne partiras jamais. C'est l'arc-en-ciel dans mon ciel bleu. Et puis l'air de cri de mon secret sous un ciel d'art, un rayon de ma journée. La seule chanson comme un piano peut jouer. Everyone cries, darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we won't stay. Even if you say, don't cry at all. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but you won't stay. You are both my love. Even if you said goodbye, then you day you're right. You day you're right.
So indeed, Am Yisrael Chai, and yet Yuval, when she's interviewed, she carries the trauma with her. She does not hide it. In interviews, she speaks openly about her experience, about the weight she still carries. She has not pretended that what happened to her can be undone. Yuval is not a story about forgetting. She's a story about what it means to carry your wounds and still choose to sing. She's a proof of what Tedeschi and Kalhudi described trauma and growth, not in sequence, but side by side. Ernst Hemingway, is it him? Yeah. 1 minute. Ernst Hemingway quote and said once that the world breaks every okay. I lost the presentation. I'm sorry. That's why the world breaks everyone, but and afterward, some are strong and broken, broken places. And may I add my 2 cents on that? I think that people rarely become stronger at the broken places by themselves. They become stronger because someone chooses to stand beside them while they heal. And this is what we do in SAHAR, day by day, night by night. We try to be there for them and do whatever we can in order to help them recover and grow. Before October 7, SAHAR approximately handled 36,000 sessions per year. By 2025, the number had reached 65,000, more than double in less than 2 years. We expand to full 24/7 coverage. We grew our volunteer force to nearly 500 trained crisis counselors in Israel and in Israeli communities around the world, primarily in the US. These overseas volunteers who covered their nights hours before the time difference, because of the time difference, took over the lines while we were under Iranian missile attacks during daytime. They were there when we couldn't be there. We also operate a proactive outreach unit, our SAHAR, that monitors social media to find people in crisis before they even think to reach out and call us. Because SAHAR is entirely text-based and digital, we reach a population that other mental health services often miss entirely. Approximately 70% of the people who contact us are children and young people between the ages of 10 and 30. For them, picking up the phone and calling a hotline is unthinkable, but opening a chat window at midnight, that they will do. These young Israelis came of age during COVID-19, isolated, their schools closed, their social development interrupted at the most critical moments. They then lived through the judicial overall crisis of 2023, which shook the foundations of trust in Israeli institutions. And then, before the wound had any chance to heal, came October 7 and everything that has followed. This is not a generation that experienced one trauma. It's a generation that has experienced several in rapid succession at the most formative years of their lives. And yet, they are the exact same generation currently holding the front lines, and they are the future of Israel. They will build what comes next. If we do not help them process this trauma now, there can be no collective growth. Investing in their recovery is not optional, it is an obligation. And may I add and conclude by a personal note. This is my smart and beautiful daughter, Gaia. Not long ago, she became pregnant, and throughout the pregnancy, she kept asking me, Abba, into what kind of world am I bringing this child? This was obviously after October 7. And I promised her that by the time the child grows up, things would be different, better, that there would be more light than darkness. And this is Rom, my grandson. Rom turns 1 year next week, and the promise still stands. But it needs all of us to keep it. So let's do it together. Keep SAHAR lines open at 3 a.m. in the morning when someone cannot sleep and there's nowhere to turn. Help us develop technology that finds a person in crisis before they even know how to ask for help. That is how we keep the promise for Rom, for Gaia, and for all of our children, yours and ours. And this is my conclusion. Trauma describes the wound. Growth describes the possibility. And SAHAR is part of how Israel gets from one to the other. Thank you all for participating, joining, and thank you, Shiri and Harold, for organizing this beautiful conference.
Wow, thank you so much. That was fascinating and very moving, at least for me. I know Janet raised her hand, and Janet, do you want to ask a question? Are you with us? Okay, so yeah, go ahead. I don't think we can hear you. If you want to write it in the chat. In the meantime, I have a question. I have a question for you, Amir, Dr. Amir. So SAHAR's model of anonymous online chat support is quite a unique model, and I know it's working 24/7. I know it provides service in Hebrew and Arabic. Can you tell me, like, why do you think it is so important to have an online chat support? I mean, I guess the young kids and teenagers understand better than most of us adults why it is important.
I think that, we also have something which operates by phone, but we don't do that. We do the digital text-based only. And this is the language of those young people. And they're and as my daughter sometimes says, I called someone, and she doesn't mean she picked up the phone and talked to him. She means that she texted him, and they text each other. This is the way they connect with each other. They don't pick up phones anymore. So you need to be there for them via text only, and this is what we believe. In addition, we believe that by using text, we can add technological advancements into our response and leverage our ability, to respond to more people and provide them some more, services once we respond to them. It will always be a human person responding. It will never be a chat or a bot or AI mechanism. It's going to be human. But in addition to the human, and not a human in addition to technology, there will be some technological advancements that we can provide those young kids. And this is where the world is heading, especially those 70% of callers, which call us in between the ages of 10 to 30, and really need our support.
Thank you. I think I saw Janet again. Okay.
Can I ask a question? I wasn't able to raise my hand. Basically relates to the two doctors. They both mentioned specific projects that were not projects, but cases whereby one young lady lost her parents. She went into severe depression. She went to substance abuse. She recovered and put this wonderful group together. Whereas the other one went on. Were they helped by lay people or psychologists and psychiatrists to recover? because you mentioned about the recovery and the recovery having people to help them. Who are these people that are helping them, and is it always medical?
Amit, would you like to respond first?
Sure, and then unfortunately I have to leave, but thank you very much for having me and for this excellent question. So in order to provide growth, clients does not necessarily have to have a specialist, meaning MDs. Yes, they need to be assessed. Yes, to make sure that you provide them safety environment. Let's not forget that trauma experiences unfortunately often co-occurring with unsafe medical or mental health situations. So for example, for the one of the ladies or cases that we discussed earlier, there were significant substance issues that needed also to be addressed in a medical facilities like medical detox that we needed to prioritize before allowing the other growth. And of note, or in a similar note, when someone is seeking medical detox, that's part of the growth. Like they are deciding to take steps to recover, and that needs also medical attention. However, then they were referred to peer support worker, they referred to other with lived experience in this case. In the other case, they needed more medical / psychiatric support, and then a few social workers with some trauma-informed counseling. But later on, just touching base a few times a month. I can also say that good family doctors always are amazing when they are available. So in one case, GP was very invested in efforts, even in learning and asking us resource how to help their patient. So, but my bottom line is really growth can be mutual efforts between the caregivers and the patient, but we have to seek support for the other more acute or medical issues, but not always. Case by case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have to finish now because you all have to go back to your to your jobs or whatever you do. So thank you very much for attending and participating and your support. Thank you so much for Dr. Amit Rotem and for Dr. Amir Blumenfeld for taking the time and telling us about post-trauma growth, and especially how it looks like in Israel. I can say for myself, it's with everything that's happened since October 7th, as an Israeli, as we all are part of the Jewish community, it's devastating, but hearing you also gives hope, and especially that the sense of community in Israel and in the entire Jewish community around the world is so strong. So we are each other's network. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Harold.